Let's talk about self-improvement and gaming. In a recent video, I showed a mouse mat that mapped recoil patterns meant for people who play first-person shooters in order to more accurately control recoil. I was making the point that this is a sweaty-ass thing to do, and no wonder games are so competitive these days, and a lot of casual people are kind of dropping out of the multiplayer scene for this reason. All I was trying to say is, I believe that you should aim to improve your skill in a game. Totally. You should put the effort in to become better. I really believe that. I'm not saying you have to if you don't want to, but people certainly have the right to become really good at the games they play. You know, you can be really competitive with it, and you should be rewarded for that. I have no problem with that. Personally, and I think a lot of other people agree with me, there's a certain line to be drawn in the sand that certain people aren't willing to cross because it leads to a bad taste in their mouth. They believe it's poor sportsmanship. They believe it's unethical. They believe it's unfair or it's too far. I really don't have anything against people being competitive and trying to be better. In fact, that's a huge thing I want to promote on this channel. Good sportsmanship in gaming and also self-improvement through gaming as well. I actually want to draw a comparison with bodybuilding because I think it's a really perfect example. I was actually kind of under the impression that a lot of bodybuilding was done naturally. I didn't really realize that a lot of bodybuilders were pumped full of steroids. And lately I've come to the realization that a lot of the people who are really big and have like really desirable looking bodies are in fact on either steroids, TRT, or HGH. Now obviously with people doing steroids and these kinds of things, you still have to put work in. You know, it is a skill thing. You are becoming better than someone else. Okay, there could be a guy who's heavily dedicated to bodybuilding, but all he can do is make protein shakes and go to the gym. But there's another guy who can afford an entire round of supplements. He can pay a personal cook to cook him healthy meals around the clock, and then he can hire a weightlifting trainer to basically help him build mass and do all this stuff. He was still competitive and he still put that work in. What about the guy that can't afford that kind of stuff? In a competition, don't we want to see like what people actually can do? Isn't that the point of the competition? A lot of this just comes down to the sportsmanship of it for me. And I'm not devaluing the people that use these things to boost their performance. There are a ton of people who think that doing that kind of devalues the whole thing. And personally, I agree. I want to get really good at things. I would like to get in shape, but like, I don't really want to get there because of something outside of me. I want me, my discipline, my hard work, my skill set. That's what I want to be rewarded. I don't want to be rewarded for extra things that I use to aid my victory. A big part of this is at some point it stops being like a fun game that you're involved in, that you're having fun in, making decisions and like being creative and enjoying it. At some point it stops being that and it just turns into a fucking math equation. You know, like that's how RuneScape gets to me. If you really got down to brass tacks, you can probably mathematically calculate the best things, the best moves to make in any situation in any video game. And at that point, it literally just becomes like an algorithm that AI can just solve. Fine, maybe that's the most efficient way to go through it, but why is that fun to you? So when it comes to games like Apex Legends, first of all, I don't need a mouse mat because I've spent 1,200 hours in the game. I have the recoil patterns memorized already. I'm not saying you shouldn't memorize them. Let's face it, like memorizing bloom, memorizing recoil patterns, learning movement, learning areas where the good loot is, stuff like that's all part of becoming a better player in the game. You start to take it too far when you start using like third-party software and hardware to start doing some of that stuff. But it's really interesting because I know people hard disagree with that. There are people who believe that you should do everything that you legally can within the rules to get ahead. So this reminds me of an old race car driver called Smokey Eunuch. And essentially what he would do is he would find little loopholes in the rules in order to give him sort of unfair advantages. One of the rules was you can only have a certain volume capacity fuel tank for the race. One race, he passed everybody and never had to refuel, and when they inspected it, they found out that he used large diameter fuel lines to store a ton of extra fuel. It's not against the rules. In my opinion, it is a little poor sportsmanship. It's funny, and it did benefit him, so at some point you really have to ask yourself, do I really want to win that way? In racing, obviously, race cars are expensive. However, racing really is about self-improvement, and it's way more about the driver than anything. However, if you can build a car and you can fix it reliably, and you can always have like nice new tires, or you can always have new parts on your car, be upgrading it, etc., like you're going to be at an advantage. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, I'm just saying, should it be allowed? Is it really an actual competition if you don't start on like equivalent ground? And I totally understand it. I get it. Clearly, there are some people who are willing to go to way further lengths to win. The main reason that a lot of people don't want to take it to those lengths is not because they're lazy or they don't want to improve or they're not competitive people. That may be true in many cases. There are some people who just have to draw a line because they feel anything past that is just getting to a point of being unethical. Because I've basically come face to face with this with money making. Certain things, certain ways, certain tactics that I'm not willing to implement because I think they're literally immoral just to make some money. I want to be providing value if I make money. I'm not willing to profit off of water, you know what I mean? I'm not trying to sell my audience a bunch of random junk. Getting back to the gaming thing, I really do want to get better and improve. There are certain lines that have to be made in the terms of like a mouse mat. I'm not saying that you should get banned for using a mouse mat that tracks recoil patterns or something. A question that comes into my mind often is like, would you be allowed to do this on an esports team? And I think that's an interesting way to look at it too. I think another example that fits nicely into this category would be someone like Logan Paul, right? If you want to become like an influencer or famous, do you really want to do it like Logan Paul? Absolutely shameless and doing absolutely anything and everything available to you to get ahead? There's tons of people who just find that gross, reprehensible behavior. I think that perfectly translates over to the competitive side of gaming. So again, if you want to improve your game and you want to be competitive in the game, then that's totally fine. And I will also say to the casual players who do complain about competitive, you joined a competitive game. You don't get to join competition and then complain that it's competitive. You don't. I think one of the big conundrums is the advent of the professional player, because there are people who can basically afford to do this all day. You know, they spend their whole lives playing video games, man. And I think that's a big point of contention for a lot of people, because there are a lot of people who do want to be competitive and do want to improve, but they simply cannot compete with someone who dedicates 10 times the amount of time into the game. And that's a complicated thing, because I don't necessarily think they should be. If another person is spending way more time on the game than you, then yeah, they should be rewarded for it. I do agree. What do we do about that? The fact is, most people are average casual players. Those are the people that kind of keep the games alive. The devs often listen to like the streamers, the really big competitive players, but they're playing like a whole different game than we are. So I think when the devs are trying to cater to the most competitive people who are so unlike almost everyone who plays the game, that's dangerous. Without the casual players and the normal people, like, your game is gonna die, and then no one gets to enjoy the game. Then everyone has a bad time because the devs are abandoning it because people are interested in something else now. And the only solution that I can really think of for now is just a good matchmaking and ranking system that appropriately puts people with other players of similar skill levels. And it's certainly something that people are struggling to get right. Frankly, that's one of the only ways I see out of it, because again, I'm not asking people not to be competitive, and I'm not asking people not to improve themselves, and I'm also not gonna ask the casual players to just get good, because, you know, maybe they're not interested in that. You can hop on a game and just have fun. When you divide people into their personality types, different types of people are just gonna enjoy different types of gaming experiences. But anyway, I just wanted to clarify that I'm not really chastising anyone for trying hard on a video game, because I do exactly that. We have to figure out how we're going to make it work for everybody, otherwise it's probably not going to work out for anybody. Thank you so much for listening to this message, I really appreciate it, and if you enjoyed it, go ahead and follow or subscribe, and like the video, and I'll see you later, gamers.